Damn, son, where'd you find this?
What's going on, everybody? Today I want to show you how I made Fulgore's helmet from Killer Instinct 2013. I've been a fan of the series since the Super Nintendo days, and this helmet's been on the back of my mind for a long time, and I finally got around to making it, so now I'm going to show you how I did it. I started off by making a duct tape pattern on my mannequin head. The pattern itself went through a few changes before I landed on something that I was happy with, and then from there just cut it out, transferred it to cardstock, and eventually transferred it over to EVA foam. With all of my foam pieces cut out, I used my heat gun to pre-curve all of my foam pieces and apply a layer of contact cement, and once it was all tacky to the touch, just start assembling everything together. Right here are both sides of the faceplate. When assembling the helmet, I started from the front faceplate and worked my way around. So once the glue was tacky, I started with assembling this part together first. Before gluing the upper eyepieces, I'm going to burn a groove on the back side of the foam to give the eyepieces more definition. With that done, I blasted with my heat gun to really bring out those features. With the eyepieces set aside, I started the assembly of the bottom portion of the helmet. After that was done, I started assembling the top half of the helmet as well. With everything else in place, I started by installing the upper eyepieces. To finish off the main portion of the helmet, I installed the back piece. Once the construction was done, I used my heat gun to heat up the foam and used my fingers to help bring out the definition in the eyes and the cheekbone area of the helmet to help make those features pop and give it a much better look. After shaping the foam a bit, this is what I ended up with. I made a quick template for Fulgore's Predator style guided laser thingy on the side of his helmet, so I traced it onto some EVA foam and of course cut that out. I made a foam wedge to insert inside of the little laser, and I added a set of LED holders to insert inside of those holes. With my Sharpie, I drew on my desired design onto it and came up with a cool idea to integrate it into the helmet. I covered the drawn areas with clear tape, and once that was all covered, I went back over it with a Sharpie and traced that design onto that tape, and once I was done, I carefully peeled it off and transferred it over to cardstock paper and cut that design out, which I was then able to transfer that pattern onto foam and cut it out. You can see here when I peel up the tape, it keeps that pattern that I originally had and gives me just a perfect replica. And of course, transferring this over to cardstock gives you a hard template to work with, so it's not flimsy. As you can see here, it's a perfect match. I repeated this for all of the extra pieces and transferred them to 4mm foam and brought out my Dremel to round off the edges to give it a better look. With all of the accent pieces done, I applied my contact cement and piece by piece started gluing everything together, starting with the eyebrow area. I moved on to the cheekbone piece and eventually the portion at the top of the helmet. I took a break from the gluing to burn in the accent lines for the faceplate and the middle of the faceplate as well. Back to gluing the accent pieces, I struggled a little bit to get the larger strip on there, but gluing bit by bit and taking my time, it was able to go on. And once that was done, I moved on to the final backing strip. And once that was completed, this is what I ended up with. Moving on, I made a template for the laser and the eye lens pieces to be traced onto acrylic. I cut a trench into the foam so the acrylic has something to sit into and filled it up with super glue. I made a template to simulate Fulgore's cybernetic neck thingy, so I transferred that pattern over to foam, cut it out, and glued my neck guard together. I burned in some lines on the neck guard with a wheel attachment on my wood burner to simulate the cybernetic skin undertone that he has. This neck guard definitely sells the look that I was going for here. I installed some Velcro for the neck and applied a few coats of Plastidip. I sanded down some of the seams, and while I was at it, I filled in any gaps with Quick Seal. I sanded down the acrylic for the laser to help diffuse the LEDs. I traced the eye lenses on a thicker sheet of acrylic and drew on a series of dots on that acrylic sheet that I went back over with a calligraphy tip on my Dremel. Once that was done, I cut out the lenses on my bandsaw. With those dots chiseled in, the light illuminating from the LEDs should be able to spread throughout the lenses. Of course, I need those lenses to be curved, so I used my heat gun to carefully heat up that acrylic, just keep the heat gun moving, and just place it over this metal doorknob that I have to help get that rounded shape. I decided that I wanted to dye the lenses, so I dropped a packet of dye in hot water and put in my lenses, and after a few minutes pulled it out and boom, red. Although the lenses do look dark, you can see through it perfectly fine. To make Fulgore's ventilator tubes, I cut out long and short strips of foam that I glued together and then combined those separate pieces together to make each individual vent tube. Before gluing these on, I did use my cutting tool to punch out a few holes so that if I do make the whole suit, I'll be able to make these functional and have air pump into my face to keep me cool. So once that was done, I carefully glued everything together, and this was the ending result. Can't forget the ponytail, so I made a ring and cut a hole for that as well. With everything ready to go, I finally installed the LEDs, glued them in, fed them through the helmet, and glued that assembly on as well. To seal the foam, I applied a few coats of Mod Podge. I needed to make a base for the ponytail, so I followed Kenpatsu Cosplay's tutorial on how to do this, but with a few modifications based on the materials that I had and the method that I was trying to go with, since this was not going to be removable. I carved and sanded my base and made a hole big enough for my PVC pipe to insert inside of it. I glued the wig to the ponytail base following Kenpatsu Cosplay's tutorial. If you're interested and want to know more about this in depth, I highly recommend checking out her video to learn more. I applied a few layers of glossy black base coat and followed that up with All Clad's black chrome lacquer Once that was done, I went over the faceplate and vents with regular chrome to kind of get that contrast. The paint is a bit tricky to work with, so I did end up with some heavy spots, but overall it came out pretty good. Once the paint had some time to dry, I went over the gaps with a layer of pearlized black to add to the aesthetics. I measured out LEDs for each lens and trimmed it down following the guided cut lines. The next part, I'm not sure if it really helps anything or not, but I cut out a few strips of aluminum tape and wrapped it around the outside of the lens to help bounce the light around. I wired my lights together. I put one wire towards the power, the other towards my selected color, red, and once everything was put together, I glued these lights to a strip of foam that was going to be placed inside the helmet. I traced the outside of the lenses inside the helmet and applied a layer of contact cement on the helmet as well as the lip on the lens, and once that was tacky, of course, I installed them. Once that was done, I soldered up this simple circuit with a 9-volt battery case and a switch. To install the ponytail, I applied a generous amount of contact cement, and while it was still wet, I installed the PVC pipe inside of it and just waited until it dried. After brushing the hair a bit, I applied some hairspray to help it stay in place. You can see here I'm just trimming the hair down, and as I go I just brush, cut, rinse and repeat until you finally get something that looks okay. I found this tube material at Home Depot in the gardening section, and it has just the perfect look for the helmet, so I use that and cut it to size for the sake of the pictures, but if I do make the whole thing, it will be functional, I hope, but this is what it would look like if it were to be installed. So this is the completed helmet. I didn't paint the neck piece just yet. I'm gonna wait to kind of paint that at a later time. But I did have an issue right before filming this where I put a huge crack on the front of my helmet, but I'm not going to stress too much about it. Overall, I think it still looks amazing, and I couldn't be happier with the end result. So you can see this is what it looks like, and hopefully you like it just as much as I do, and maybe I'll actually make the full suit. But until then, I want to thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. And until then, y'all take care.
Ultra!